Welcome to Therapy by Choice podcast. My name is Robin Vance. I am your host for this podcast and an associate marriage and family therapist working with individuals, couples, and families. My therapeutic services are offered through Therapy by Choice, which is a private practice with offices located in San Jose and Palo Alto, California. On this podcast, we offer educational information on a variety of mental health topics. We speak to specialists in the field, and we answer your questions. We focus on helping you navigate life's challenges and offer easy-to-follow practical advice and opinions. Welcome to Therapy by Choice podcast. I'm your host, Robin Vance. Today, we're discussing a topic that sounds complex, but you actually engage in them quite often: cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are also known as unhelpful thinking styles. These are sneaky, automatic thoughts that change how we view ourselves, other people, and the world around us. They can cause feelings of anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem, and they can also lead to stress in our relationships. Cognitive distortions can also contribute to maladaptive behaviors. Now, let's stop for a moment because I realize you may have heard the term maladaptive behaviors before, but don't completely get it. Simply put, maladaptive behaviors are actions that we take that stop us from getting involved, adjusting, or coping with different parts of life. Now, let's return to discussing unhelpful ways of thinking. The great thing about cognitive distortions is that when we learn to spot these thoughts, we can question them and look at them in a new way. Today, I'm going to be guiding you through 12 common cognitive distortions that can be misleading. I will provide for you real-life examples, share tips on how to see things differently. I'll give you a fun quiz and discuss how therapy can help you get out of these tricky thought patterns. And like all topics we discuss on Therapy by Choice podcast, I will share this information in a way that is simple to understand, easy to absorb, and straightforward to put into practice. So, let's get started. Our first cognitive distortion, or unhelpful thinking style, is magnification and minimization. Now, this distortion exaggerates the negatives and downplays the positives. You might blow a mistake out of proportion or dismiss an achievement like it's no big deal. For example, let's say you get a 98 on a test, but you say to yourself, "I can't believe I missed those 2 questions. I'm such an idiot." The impact of magnification and minimization is that it keeps your self-esteem low and increases stress and perfectionism. Now, in a relationship, you might dismiss compliments or feel inadequate, creating emotional distance from others. A good reframe tip for this cognitive distortion is to ask yourself, am I seeing this in proportion? What would I say to a friend who said this about themselves? Next up is catastrophizing. Now, this is when you expect the worst case scenario, no matter how unlikely. For example, let's say you send a risky text message and you don't get a reply within 10 minutes. You think, they're mad at me. I've ruined the relationship. The impact of catastrophizing is it causes unnecessary anxiety and can lead to avoidance behaviors. And in a relationship, you might overreact or withdraw based on imagined outcomes, which confuses and frustrates others. A good reframing tip is to try grounding questions like, what's the actual evidence that this will happen? What's most likely? Next up is overgeneralization. And this is when you take one instance and assume it's always true. Let's say you bomb a presentation at work, and then you think, I always mess things up. I'll never be good at public speaking. The impact is it reinforces hopelessness and discouragement. And in relationships, you may give up on relationships or assume people will always hurt or abandon you based on one experience. A tip for this is to look for exceptions. Ask yourself, was there ever a time this didn't happen? Next up, magical thinking. And what magical thinking is when you believe unrelated actions or thoughts can influence outcomes in unrealistic ways. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, so let's take a look at an example. If I don't reply to this message in exactly 5 minutes, something bad will happen. Now, the impact is it can increase anxiety and compulsive behaviors. And in a relationship, this may cause you to feel overly responsible for others or control situations in unhealthy ways. Now, reframing for this would be identifying what you can control and separate it from superstition. Next up is personalization. And this is when you believe that you're the cause of external events, even when they're not about you. Let's say your friend is in a bad mood and you automatically think, it's probably something I did. The impact is this leads to guilt, shame, and often over-apologizing. And the impact on a relationship is it can cause emotional burnout and create unnecessary tension. Now, a reframe tip is to ask, is this really about me? What else could be going on? Next up is jumping to conclusions. And it's exactly how it sounds. You make assumptions without evidence. Now, there are two types of jumping to conclusions: mind reading and fortune telling. And I know you're probably already thinking, I do this on a daily basis. Let's start off with mind reading. Let's say you say to yourself, oh, she didn't say hi to me. She must think I'm annoying. The impact is this leads to insecurity and withdrawal. And in a relationship, it creates misunderstandings and can damage trust. Now, with mind reading, we want to challenge the assumption. Ask instead, what other explanations are there? The other type that we're referring to is called fortune telling. Now, with fortune telling, let's look at an example. Let's say you say, there's no point for applying for this job. I won't get it anyway. The impact of fortune telling is it keeps you stuck and limits opportunity. And in a relationship, you might avoid emotional risk like vulnerability or honest conversations. A reframe tip for fortune telling is to focus on what you can do now. I don't know the outcome, but I can try. Our next unhelpful thinking style is emotional reasoning. And the definition of this is when you believe something is true because you feel it strongly. An example, I feel unlovable, so I must be unlovable. Now, that doesn't sound so good, right? And the impact of this is it reinforces negative beliefs and ignores facts. And the relationship impact of emotional reasoning is it can lead to insecurity or clinginess if you feel rejected without reason. A good reframe tip is just to remember feelings are valid, but not always facts. Ask, what's the evidence outside of how I feel? The next one up is disqualifying the positive. And I know even I've been guilty of this one. And this is defined as when you reject positive experiences or compliments. So my folks who struggle with receiving compliments, this is probably where you live the most. So an example of this would be, Sure, they said I did great, but they were just being nice. The impact of disqualifying the positive is this keeps your self-worth low and prevents joy. And in relationships, it may frustrate loved ones who want to support you, or it can make them feel like their efforts aren't seen. Good reframe tip that I actually use is to pause, receive the compliment, and say thank you, even when it feels awkward. I know it sounds cliche, but trust me, it goes a long way. The next cognitive distortion is should statements. Probably sounds very familiar as well, right? Now, in should statements, you pressure yourself with rigid rules and expectations. Example, I should always be available. I should never say no. This leads to guilt, burnout, and resentment. And relationship impact can lead to people-pleasing or resentment when others don't live up to your unspoken rules. A reframe tip that works for should statements is to replace should with I'd prefer to or it would be helpful if. All right, our next style is all or nothing thinking, and this can also be known as black and white thinking. In this style, you see things in black and white with no middle ground, or what some folks may say, no gray area. An example of this is, if I don't do this perfectly, I'm a total failure. The impact is this creates pressure and discouragement from even trying. And relationship impact can lead to harsh judgments or extreme reactions, like idealizing someone one day and cutting them off the next. A reframe tip is to practice embracing good enough and ask if there's a gray area here. Now, I'm sure with the scenarios and my descriptions, you've probably recognized that you've probably done one, some, or maybe even all cognitive distortions at some point. So let's take this a bit further with a pop quiz. I'm going to present to you some scenarios, and I want you to think which unhelpful thinking style is at play here. Now let's quickly review the 12 just to refresh your memory. We have magnification and minimization, catastrophizing, overgeneralization, magical thinking, personalization, jumping to conclusion, which includes mind reading and fortune telling, emotional reasoning, disqualifying the positive, should statements, and all or nothing thinking, also known as black and white thinking. Let's take a look at our first example. Ted receives 10 positive comments on his photography portfolio and one critique suggesting he work on lighting. He fixated on the critique thinking, that person saw through me. I'm not a real artist. Which one do you think was at play here? If you guess magnification and minimization, you would be correct. In this scenario, Ted minimized the compliments, telling himself the people were just being nice or didn't understand photography. Question number 2. Chance's car makes a strange noise on the way to work. Great, he thought. The engine's probably ruined. I'll have to spend thousands of dollars or go into debt, and maybe I'll lose my job if I can't get there. What did you guess? Does this sound catastrophic? If you guess catastrophizing, you would be correct. In this scenario, Chance hadn't even looked under the hood yet, and actually it turned out just to be a loose belt. Question number 3. Brittany's application for a freelance gig was rejected. She sighed and said, "I never get anything I apply for. I guess I'm just not good enough for this industry." Now, this one is a little bit tricky. I'm wondering if you know which one is at play here. If you guess overgeneralization, you will be correct. And in this example, one rejection became a sweeping statement about Brittany's career and future. Our next example, Joe walked under a ladder on his way to a job interview. Great, now I've jinxed it. I'm going to bomb this interview just because of that. Sounds pretty superstitious, right? So which cognitive distortion is at play here? If you guessed magical thinking, you would be correct. So when Joel stumbled during the interview, he believed that the ladder had somehow cursed him. Next up, during a family dinner, Jessica's brother seemed quiet and distracted. She thought, he must be mad at me. I probably said something wrong last week. What do you think Jessica is thinking? Because remember, she's saying this to herself. It's a thought for herself. In this example, it's personalization. And maybe in truth, her brother was just stressed about work. But Jessica internalized his mood as her fault. Our next question. During a group discussion, John noticed two people whispering and glancing over at him. They're probably criticizing what I just said, he assumed, and he stopped contributing to the conversation. What do you think happened here? Well, John was jumping to conclusions. And maybe in reality, the two people that were whispering were actually talking about lunch plans. All right, next up. After giving a presentation, Jane noticed her manager didn't say much. She thought to herself, he thinks I'm incompetent. I could tell by the way he looked at me. All right, key word there, I can tell by the way he looked at me. What do you think is at play here? If you guessed mind reading, you would be correct. So Jane believes she knew what the manager was thinking with no direct evidence. All right, our next example. William didn't apply for a prestigious scholarship. They're going to pick someone else like me anyway. Why bother? In this way, what is he doing when he says they're not going to pick someone like me anyway? Why bother? If you guess that he's fortune telling, you would be correct. He predicted rejection and acted on that assumption without ever trying. All right, in our next example, Danielle felt insecure and out of place at a party. She thought to herself, I feel this awkward. I must not belong here. People probably can tell I'm weird. This one's a little bit difficult, but this one is actually emotional reasoning. I'll say that again. Danielle felt insecure and out of place at a party. If I feel this awkward, I must not belong here. People can tell I'm weird. In this example, Danielle interpreted her feelings as facts rather than temporary nerves or social discomfort. All right, our next quiz example is, after hosting a successful dinner party, Jack said, everyone had fun because they were just being polite. They probably hated the food but didn't want to say anything. If you guessed disqualifying the positive, you would be correct. Jack couldn't accept the genuine compliments he received and he brushed them off. All right, we've got two more to go. Our next one is, after taking a nap on a weekend afternoon, Catherine woke up and thought, I should have been productive today. I shouldn't waste time. I'm being lazy. Now, you probably already know which one this is, and this would definitely be a should statement. Instead of recognizing Catherine's need for rest, she criticized herself with rigid expectations. All right, last up. Jim planned to go to the gym 5 times this week, but he only made it twice. He said, well, that's it. I failed my goal. Might as well give up for the rest of the week. This is an example of all or nothing thinking, if you've guessed it correctly. Jim saw his effort as a complete failure because it wasn't perfect. All right, I'm hoping that quiz kind of helped you wrap your mind a little bit more about those unhelpful thinking styles. But now I want to reframe each of the 12 cognitive distortions using the same examples from our quiz. And what I want to do is I want to show how someone can challenge or rewrite thinking into a healthier, more balanced mindset. And when we have that mindset, it helps build emotional resilience and reduce unnecessary distress. So let's think back to magnification and minimization. That distortive way of thinking said, that critique means I'm not a real artist. The reframe there could be, one person gave helpful feedback that's valuable, but 10 others really liked my work. I can grow and still be good at what I do. Catastrophizing. The distorted thought there was, my car's breaking down. I'll go into debt and lose my job. The reframe is, it's probably something minor. I can get it checked before jumping to conclusions. I've handled car issues before. Overgeneralization. That distorted thinking said, I never get anything I apply for. But the reframe says, this is one rejection, not the end. I've gotten opportunities before, and I'll keep improving with each application. Magical thinking. The thought was, walking under that ladder ruined my interview. The reframe. The ladder had nothing to do with it. If the interview didn't go well, I can learn from it and do better next time. Personalization. That distorted thought says, he's quiet because I've upset him. The reframe is, his mood probably has nothing to do with me. I can check in if I'm concerned, but I shouldn't assume responsibility for others' emotions. Jumping to conclusions. The thought is, they're whispering about me. The reframe is, I don't know what they're talking about. Assuming it's negative just makes me anxious for no reason. Mind reading. The distorted way of thinking says, my boss thinks I'm incompetent. The reframe is, I can't know what he's thinking. He might have just been tired or focused on something else. Fortune telling. The thought says, I won't get the scholarship, so I won't apply. The reframe is, I don't know what will happen, but I do know I have a chance, and I can't win something I don't apply for. Emotional reasoning. The distorted thought says, I feel awkward, so I must not belong. But the new thought says, feeling nervous doesn't mean I don't belong. It's normal to feel this way sometimes. It'll pass. Disqualifying the positive. The distorted thought is, they were just being polite. They didn't even enjoy the dinner. A good way to reframe this is, they said they enjoyed it and they stayed for hours. I'll choose to believe their words unless I have a real reason not to. Should statements. The distorted thought says, I should have been productive. I'm just being lazy. The reframe is, rest is productive too. I needed the nap, and I can get back to my task with more energy. All or nothing thinking, or black and white thinking. The distorted thought says, I only worked out twice, so I failed. The reframe says, 2 workouts are better than none. I didn't meet my full goal, but I still made progress. Now remember, reframes are grounded in self-compassion, realism, and flexibility. And reframes are the keys to reducing the power of cognitive distortions. Now, I'm sure after going through this list, you've probably realized you've checked off some or all unhealthy thinking styles that you yourself have engaged in. Now, just remember, cognitive distortions are often automatic. We don't choose them, but we can challenge them. Now, let's discuss how therapy can help. Remember, therapy is always a safe space to slow down, examine your thoughts, and understand where they come from. Now, a specific modality called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is powerful for identifying these distortions and learning how to reframe them. A therapist can help you notice your patterns, ask better questions, and practice new ways of thinking until they become natural. Now, working on cognitive distortions doesn't mean turning off your emotions. It just means learning to think with them, not through them. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Therapy by Choice podcast. If you recognize yourself in some of these patterns, you're not alone. This is the part of the human experience, and recognizing them is the first step towards clarity and growth. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you care about, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Therapy by Choice Podcast for more mental health tips and tools throughout the week and a bit of humor to brighten your day. I'm Robin Vance. Take good care. While we hope to provide insight and education, our podcast does not replace therapy, and listening to our podcast does not establish a therapeutic relationship. If you or someone you know are in crisis, please call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988.